See, if the God of the universe created you and I with a purpose, then it would only make sense that he would want to somehow or some way communicate with us. So maybe God revealed himself to a select group of people and inspired them to write everything down.
Hey, welcome back, everyone. My name is Andrew, and you are listening to the $1 Apologist podcast. And Steve, welcome to our podcast.
Thank you. Good to be here.
Now, this, I believe, is controversial. Now, a lot of people believe that that Charles Darwin, we call him the father of evolution, but he just didn't come up with this on his own.
Correct.
So who did he start reading, or who did he like before he came up with the survival of the animal kingdom, or the survival of life, as you say?
The main influence on Darwin was Charles Lyell in his book, The Principles of Geology, which, again, our son is just fascinating, man, because he actually, the original copy, the copy of Charles Lyell's Principles of Geology, Volume 1, that Charles Darwin took on board the Beagle with him, that changed his thinking, is right there in Darwin's house, and it's open up to it's really cool to actually see. I mean, my son got to see it in real life, but he sent us the picture of it with him there. It's like, wow, this is the actual book that changed Darwin's filter. He went to Cambridge. He went to university to be a minister. He thought he believed his Bible, Darwin. He wanted to be a minister. There are discrepancies as to how he got the book. One account says Charles Lyell gave it to him. One says Captain Fitzroy gave it to him. One says one of his teachers gave it to him. Bottom line is he had Principles of Geology on board the Beagle. And he's on that boat for 5 years sailing around. And reading that book caused him to have thoughts that didn't used to be there, because now he's seeing things through a whole different filter. And he admits it too. He's seeing the world through Charles Lyell's eyes. I'm actually going to show that quote of his tonight, as a matter of fact, where he sees now everything through somebody else's eyes. That is what's happening to our children. We're trying to tell them the Bible's true. We're trying to teach them. We're trying to raise them godly. We're trying to do the best we can in churches. And they're getting other stuff out there. Now, all the people that are delivering that stuff, they're not all evil people. They're just doing what they know to do. Okay?
That's what they know.
But it doesn't change the fact that now that idea is put into them for the very first time that should have really never been there in the first place, especially at that young age. But Charles Lyell was a huge influence. He's considered the father of uniformitarianism, and where he says that all the processes that are going on today have always been taking place at the same rate. But there's no way to know that kind of stuff. But also Malthus was an influence on Darwin. There were some people all kind of coming together all at the same time. They're feeding off of each other, but the main catalyst was the Principles of Geology. And interestingly enough, all the textbooks, when they're talking about Darwin, will always say the main influence on Darwin was Charles Lyell's book, The Principles of Geology. And so where they break out that geologic column for the first time and give those layers names and labels and lengths of time and all that kind of stuff. And that's the same tactic that's used with our kids today. It's the same thing, and it's messing them up. It really is, because the flood account is what accounts for all that stuff.
Sure. Yeah.
And normally at our meetings we actually do a flood representation too. I had a lot of kids just bring a baggie of dirt, a little Ziploc. We put it in a big jar, mix it all up real well, pour a bunch of water in it, flood it, stir it around, and within the 2-hour time that I'm talking, that jar settles out into layers right in front of everybody's eyes. And they look at that and they say, man, I've never seen anything like that. And when you look at it, this earth, you see those layers. Those layers are explained through Noah's flood, big time. They're not explained through just eons of time. But that principle is what Charles Darwin then was looking through.
Right. Now, Charles Darwin wrote the book, The Origin of the Species, which is kind of a weird name for a book, because he doesn't ever talk about the origin of the species. It's always about the survival of the species. And John Lennox, who was a Christian apologist, he said this. He said that science cannot answer the basic questions of a child.
Right.
How did we get here? What's our purpose? Yeah. What's wrong and right? What's morality?
Right.
And what's our destination? Where are we going?
Right.
So his point is that science has limitations. It really does. It has, and you, in order to sometimes interpret science, you need philosophy,
right,
to do it. So let's talk a little bit about who Charles Darwin influenced. There was a disciple of Charles Darwin by the name of Ernst Haeckel, and he produced the drawings, the Haeckel drawings.
Right.
Go ahead and tell us a little bit about what he did, the immoral thing that he did, I guess, with the drawings.
Yeah, he actually in 1868, I think it was 1868, he drew the pictures. Ontogeny recapitulates phylogeny is what it is, where he says that everything is going through the evolutionary process in the egg or the womb or whatever it's developing in. And he took a pig, a dog, a turtle, humans, some various things, and he drew these pictures. But he absolutely fabricated the pictures. And he confessed it as the fraud that it was. They had a kind of a university trial on the guy, and he actually confessed that it was not true. But he actually drew 1868, 1874 is when it's proven he had faked those pictures. Also in the same year, he drew very vividly a tree, literally a tree, not just a stick-figured thing, and had it says Negro, has a black man, says Negro, but it's the other N word. And then he's got 3 different monkeys in this tree. And his whole point was, he said, they didn't come from a monkey, they are a monkey. And I make the statement all the time when I'm talking about the social ills and things that started with him. Then we go on to Marx and Hitler and all these kind of people. But if evolution's true, racism isn't allowed. Racism is required.
Absolutely.
Because if evolution's true, somebody's on top. Well, if somebody's on top, then by definition, everybody else is under that. And so if this guy thinks he's the one on top, make the list however you want to, get enough people to believe it, and then you get your ideas in the mainstream.
And where do we get our morality from in the process of evolution?
Where does morality come from? What is right and wrong? What are morals? What is that? There's no definition. When we throw God out the window, relativism's the only thing left. You think it's okay to do such and such, but I don't. Well, just you go ahead and do it, and I don't do it, and we'll just all agree to be different. But there's no standard. There's no morals, and a lot of times then people think there's no accountability. Of course, there is going to be accountability nevertheless, but that's also what's being taught to our children. Right. But all that stuff started way back young, because if it's just an evolutionary thing that we're going through, then what difference does it make? And we think that I know I don't want to get off too far off track where you want to go with it, but a couple of years ago, the Project Veritas, the undercover camera stuff at the abortion clinics and all this kind of stuff, made kind of big news. Nothing ever became of it, which is always typical. But anyway, it was serious stuff. But everybody thought, wow, this is a new thing. They're birthing babies alive and then deciding, and they're all this partial birth abortion and all this kind of stuff. That's been going on for a long time, a long. I've known it's been going on for over 20 years, but the public didn't know it. And the thing of it is, and I've got documentation that I used to lay out at our meetings, and it's just too gruesome for people, so I don't really lay it out anymore. I carry it with me, but I don't lay it out. But the thing of it is, one time we had a girl come up to me after the meeting, and all this stems from Ernst Haeckel, his drawings. This is where they get the justification.
Which are still
okay.
It's still in textbooks, by the way.
Textbooks today. I have people bring me their books all the time, and there it is. But it justifies, because if it's going through the evolutionary process, then it's not a baby yet, so what difference does it make? But a young lady came up to me, she's stiff-legged, walking. And she's coming in one leg, stiff-legged. And she said, I'd like to talk to you a minute, Mr. Grohman. So I said, okay, come over here. And she said, I guess you can tell I'm handicapped. And I said, well, I do see that you walk stiff-legged on what, do you have a brace on your knee or what? She says, no, I don't have a leg. I said, okay, I didn't know. So anyway, we talked for a little bit. She said, I was born this way. In the womb, they knew this is the way I was. The doctors counseled my parents to just go ahead and terminate my life because I'm not going to be complete, and they could have another one. They're a young family, and they could just start over. And the mom said, no, this is my baby, I'm going to have it. So she said, went through, I'm born. After I was born, for 2 weeks, my parents were counseled daily, that's the terminology they use, to terminate me, and they could still consider it an abortion, as long as it's less than 2 weeks. And then she looked at me and said, I'm not supposed to be here. And she just busted out in tears. And it's like, when you talk to people who live through or suffer or a victim of the mindset that he started originally, Ernst, it'll change the way you look at it forever, because you realize these are people, these are human beings, these are these are flesh and blood. So anyway, it's just, very wicked stuff is justified through evolution. And it's not me saying it. I've got all kinds of quotes of them saying it.
Well, Richard Dawkins, again, my favorite atheist, he said that DNA just is. It doesn't care, and we march to its beat. In other words,
right.
Whatever our DNA says or is programmed inside of us, that's what we're going to do. And so I always said, then how can there be morality if you do that? Because can't you just go into a court of law and say, hey, I killed this person, but it's not my fault because I was just marching to the beat of my DNA. So you shouldn't judge me. You shouldn't judge me on it. And so I just find that interesting. Also, when Haeckel's drawings came out, this is a quote from Charles Darwin. The embryos of the most distinct species belonging to the same class are closely similar, talking about the drawings, but become, when fully developed, widely dissimilar. This is by far the strongest single class of facts in favor of my theory. There's one problem, though. Yeah. Right? The drawings were faked.
The drawings were fake.
They were a fraud.
Fake. He admitted that they were fake. That's the sad reality of it, but yet it's still shown to be in all textbooks today.
Yeah, and what Haeckel did is he took a cookie cutter and just tweaked them to make them look very dissimilar. He had a worldview, and he lied about it, and he lied about it to support that worldview.
Right.
And not only that, Haeckel he just cherry picked his samples.
Right.
I think he had like a fish, a salamander, I forgot what the other ones were.
Dog,
pig. Yeah. And so he
used several, but yeah.
Instead of just drawing them randomly, he just kind of picked things that were kind of similar and then faked the drawings. But if you look
at them up against pictures of each of those at those stages they were supposedly at where he drew them, they're not anywhere.
No,
they're not anywhere the similar.
Yeah,
they're not anywhere the same. But yet he intentionally fabricated this thing because he was so respected. People believed him. That's one of the big problems we have, even with our children. Because and I'm not trying to belittle teachers. I don't mean it that way. Because there's some good teachers that are just they're pulling their hair out too. Because they don't like what's going on, but they don't know what to do because they don't want to lose their job. They don't know what to do. And I talked to many, many, many of them, but they're still an authority figure, good one or bad one. They're still an authority figure to our children. And the book, they have to learn to pass the test and everything. So it's still the information is presented from an authority figure to our children, and they believe it. They don't want to believe it sometimes, but they don't know what to do with it. And just to tell them I don't believe things when they show facts, they call them facts, they're so-called facts, but that's what they call them. It confuses them, and they don't know what to make of it.
And there was a quote about the drawings. A British embryologist, Michael Richardson, he quoted something in 1997. He said this: "It looks like it's turning out to be one of the most famous fakes in biology," talking about the drawings. Are you familiar with the National Center of Science Education?
Yes.
Eugenie Scott is the chairman. Yes. Okay, so she was questioned about those drawings, about still being in textbooks, even though it was a big fraud. And this is her answer. "Well, the drawings are cheap and easily available. We know Haeckel's embryos are false, but it teaches a principle that's true." That blows my mind.
Right.
When I hear something like that. We know that they're fake, but we're still going to use them because they're cheap and they teach a principle that's true.
Yeah, she hated me for a while when she was in charge there.
Now you mentioned something else in that you saw in a textbook. You mentioned that there was a picture where they showed the wing of a bat, a flipper, the leg of a horse, and the arm of a human being, and that's what we would call homology. All right, explain to my listeners what exactly is the homology.
Well, they say there's a common design or they don't like to use the word design, a common structure. And they'll say, well, we all have a radius and an ulna in our forelimb of some sort, whether it's a wing, a flipper, a fin, a leg, arm, whatever. But number one, it's man that named the terms. But here's the thing. I mean, we're sitting in chairs. You and I are sitting in chairs. They've got legs.
Right.
Well, the table that's between us has legs.
Right.
I mean, I've got legs. You've got legs. I mean, dogs have legs. But to say that because they all have legs, they came from the common ancestors, just seems preposterous. When God is making things, is the way I look at it, if a system works, use it over and over with modifications. It doesn't mean we used to be each other. It just means that the same portion of that structure of that thing, whatever it may be, is similar. But evolutionists use that as an example that we all have a common ancestor. But sometimes I'll even oversimplify things, especially with schools or whatever. But, a dog and a horse, they both have a horizontal body. They both got back legs in the back and front legs in the front, tail out the back, neck on the front, head on the front of the neck, ears on top, and then snouts out the front, nose on the very end, eyes above. But they didn't come from each other. Mm-hmm. But because there's a similar structure, they have legs, and we can call them radius and ulna and humerus, and that doesn't mean they used to be each other. But that's one of the evidences that evolutionists use as evidence that we used to be each other.
Okay, so where else does that evidence take us? If not that we have a common ancestor, what could that evidence infer?
That we have a common designer.
A common designer.
Yeah, there's the same designer designed us.
But you never hear that in schools.
No, but you can look at paintings. And if you know paintings, paintings are your thing. You can look at paintings in this building. You can go to another state and see some paintings in a museum. And if you know what you're doing, you can look and say, I know who did mm-hmm. that one, because there's a common theme or whatever that can run through a given painter's paintings. And you can see it because you know paintings, whatever. Mm-hmm. Well, it doesn't mean that those used to be each other or they have anything to do with each other. It means they have the same painter that painted them. And it's the same with the design of things. And, they say, and also things have to develop, yes. But also I'd like to remind people, look, God built this place to survive. Now, there are animals that eat plants and animals that some of those animals don't eat. Mm-hmm. There are animals that eat some of those plants and animals that some of those animals don't eat. Some of us eat plants and animals that some of us don't eat. There has to be some kind of common chemical makeup of everything. Otherwise, where would nutrition come from? Nobody could survive. Nothing could survive. So there's only a certain number of elements available in the first place. So, of course, things are chemically made of similar stuff, different combinations. Well, of course, they're going to look the same. If something's going to walk, it's upright. We build robots in our society today that can walk.
They're jumping and flipping.
They're doing all this stuff and trying to mimic the human form. But it didn't mean they used to be us. Mm-hmm. It just, when a system works and a design works, then it's just used over and over and over. And it just seems so straightforward to me, but it doesn't mean we used to be each other.
Now, in the textbooks for the evidence of homology, this is a biology textbook in 2009. It shows the pictures of the four, the limb and the horse's leg and the flipper and the wing, and it says also providing evidence for evolution. Anatomical similarities between many species give signs of common descent. And that's all it says. It doesn't say anything. Or it could infer that there was a common designer,
right,
or a common creator.
But let me say something very important about this, because I do this at our meetings in a church. Mm-hmm. Right in front of everybody. I'll show a picture like that mm-hmm. out of one of the textbooks, just whatever, and it's bird, horse, human, whatever, and I'll read what it says. Proves we have a common ancestor. Well, I'll just find some child in the audience. I'll ask him, how old are you? I've done this with as young as 4, and I've done this with 13, whatever. I try to pick a young person, and I'll say, I got a question for you. I've never talked to this person in my life. I have no clue who they are. We didn't prearrange anything. I just pick somebody that I'm seeing. That sometimes I'll even pick one that I know is not paying attention. They're probably on the pew or chair playing with something, and I'll get their attention. Hey, I get their attention. They have no clue what we're even talking about. And I'll just ask them, got a question, and I'll look at the screen. Bird, horse, and human, we'll just use those. If a bird has a baby, what is it going to be? And they'll usually look at me like, is this a trick question or what, And a bird, I'll say, if a horse has a baby, what's it going to be? A horse? It is amazing. The truth is in us. Mm-hmm. A 4-year-old knows it.
Right.
A 4-year-old knows. I will ask him, can a bird have a horse as a baby? They know the answer is no. I find it amazing because it's so powerful when you see some child that knows full well that what the textbook says is not true, but yet they know the truth of it because it's already put in there. There's certain things that are built in at creation mm-hmm. that's there, and the truth is in them already. That truth has to be removed out, because all those people that write those textbooks, that put that information in, they were a little kid one day that knew a bird has a bird and a horse has a horse. And so when we understand that just because we have our children in church does not mean that they're going to turn out okay, because they are also out there in the real world getting all kinds of information put into them that is removing and replacing the truth that God put there and or parents put there in the first place. I hope that makes sense. But it's because we've seen it over and over and over. It's a real sad thing when we see parents devastated because they don't understand what went wrong, because they did go to church every Sunday, and they don't understand where the problem was. And so it's not just that it's strange or silly or funny or it's dangerous. It's real, and it is a real struggle with a lot of people.
Now we have everyday examples of things that are tweaked and products that are tweaked by a common designer. I mean, we can go to
absolutely
iPhones and iPads and iPods and iWatches, and the smart designers will always stick with a design that works and then tweak that design without changing the design into something that it's not.
Right.
But you never read about that in the textbooks at all.
Exactly.
Ever.